Hi everyone, my name is Lisa and I'm the study coordinator of the Healthy Brain Project biomarker study, and over here is Dr. Nawaf Yassi, who's a neurologist at the Royal Melbourne Hospital and also a lead investigator of the Healthy Brain Project. Good morning, Nawaf.
Good morning, Lisa.
So we're here today to talk about lumbar punctures. So why don't we start off by talking about what actually is a lumbar puncture?
Great. So lumbar puncture is a procedure where we collect fluid from the lower back, and that fluid is called cerebrospinal fluid. Now that's the fluid that's produced in the brain and bathes the brain and also bathes the spinal cord. So that fluid can give us a lot of information about the health of the brain. Typically in adults, people have about 150 mils of cerebrospinal fluid or CSF. And when we do a lumbar puncture, we collect using a special needle from the lower back up to 10 mils of that kind of fluid. We know that that fluid is very rapidly turned over, and so our bodies make about 20 mils of cerebrospinal fluid every hour, and so we take only a very small proportion of the 150 mils of total CSF, and we know that the body reproduces it very quickly after that.
Okay, so is there any risk of damaging the spinal cord with this procedure?
So that's a very common concern, a very common question that people have, but the risk is incredibly low. And I've got a model here which shows you the anatomy of the lower back. Now the lower back, or the lumbar spine, is made up out of five backbones or vertebrae, and they are numbered from L1 to L5. So this over here is L1 and down here is L5. Now the spinal cord comes through a space here that's formed in the bodies of these vertebrae, and we know that the spinal cord usually ends at about L1 over here. Now when we do a lumbar puncture, we collect fluid from between L3 and L4, or between L4 and L5. So we're collecting fluid. Our spinal needle is going in well below the end of the spinal cord, and so the risk of damage to the spinal cord is incredibly low, and it's a very safe procedure. In fact, it's very similar to another procedure which a lot of people are familiar with, which is an epidural anesthetic. That's obviously a procedure that a lot of women have before having a baby. A lumbar puncture is very similar in a lot of ways to that procedure.
Okay, and what type of needle do we use for this procedure?
So there are two needles that are used during the procedure. The first is to give some local anesthetic just under the skin in the lower back, and that's just a very standard needle. The second needle is called a spinal needle, and now in this study we're using a very specially designed spinal needle that's actually designed to spread apart the tissues as it goes in, rather than to cut the tissues. And the reason behind that is to limit the amount of damage to the tissues that the spinal needle causes, and to also reduce the risk of a headache, which is one of the common side effects after a lumbar puncture.
Okay, so what are some other common side effects?
Okay, so the commonest side effect is probably some bruising and tenderness around the lower back. Mm-hmm. Now as I said before, we give some local anesthetic so that during the procedure, what people should be feeling is not a sharp pain, but some pushing and some prodding as the needle goes in. But sometimes after the procedure, people can have a small amount of bruising and a small amount of tenderness and pain around the lower back, mm-hmm. and that usually settles down after a few days. Sometimes people need to take some pain medication for that, and we'd encourage people to take very simple things like paracetamol or ibuprofen if they've got bruising and some tenderness around the lower back. The other not uncommon side effect that people report is a headache. So, and the headache is a result of us taking some of the fluid of the cerebrospinal fluid. Mm-hmm. In most cases, in the vast majority of cases, that headache again settles down over a few days. The headache is classically worse when people are sitting up or upright, and improves when people are lying down. So the first thing that we usually encourage people to do is, if possible, if they do develop a headache, try to lie down and try to take some rest until the headache settles down. The other thing that's very helpful if people develop a headache is to keep very well hydrated, so to drink water, other fluids as much as possible to keep yourself well hydrated.
Okay.
In particular, we know that caffeine helps this kind of headache, so if you like coffee or if you like caffeinated soft drinks and things, that might be a chance to stock up on those kind of things just for a couple of days until the headache settles down. It's incredibly rare for the headache, particularly using the special needles that we are using in this study for this headache to develop into anything more long-term or more serious.
Okay. And how long does this procedure take?
So the procedure takes somewhere between 15 minutes and half an hour. Most of the procedure is actually preparation. So the procedure is done with people either sitting up on the side of the bed, hunched over, or lying on their side, again curled up as a ball. And the procedure is done by a qualified neurologist who is very experienced in doing these procedures. And as I said, most of the procedure is actually preparation. So the first half, at least, of the procedure is the neurologist feeling around some of the landmarks of the lower back, trying to identify where some of those levels are, where the anaesthetic needle should go and where the spinal needle should go. And we teach people that the longer you take to prepare, the more preparation you do, that the procedure itself can actually be very quick, and that the procedure itself can actually be 5 or 10 minutes if the preparation time is taken properly. But overall, it takes somewhere between 15 minutes and half an hour.
Okay, and the procedure itself, can it be painful?
So the procedure, generally we use the anaesthetic to reduce the amount of sharp or sort of actual pain that people feel, but most people tell us that they have the anaesthetic, when it goes in, can sting a little bit, like a mosquito bite or a bee sting, just for a few seconds before the skin is numbed. After that stage, most people tell us that they don't feel actual pain, but what they do feel is some prodding and some pushing, and they might feel like a sort of a strange feeling down in the lower back. But the idea of the anaesthetic, the local anaesthetic, is to make sure that people aren't having pain. Now, all of these potential side effects and things that people might experience, we'll go through with participants on the day. We have a consent form that outlines all of the possible risks and side effects of a lumbar puncture, and so people can ask questions on the day and really try to understand what the procedure involves and what the potential side effects might be.
And why are we doing lumbar punctures as part of the Healthy Brain Project?
That's a very good question. So we can analyse CSF, as I said before, to look at the health of the brain, and sometimes in hospitals or in medical clinics we'll be sending samples of CSF to look for inflammation, for example, so brain inflammation or nervous system inflammation. Other times we send it off to look for signs of bleeding around the brain if we're suspicious that someone may have had some bleeding on the brain. In this study, what we're most interested in is to look at the level of proteins which are associated with Alzheimer's disease. And so those proteins are amyloid beta and tau protein. And what we can do when we collect CSF is we can send off the samples to measure those levels of amyloid beta and tau. And that gives us an idea of the processes that lead to Alzheimer's disease. And what we're most interested in the Healthy Brain Project is the very, very early stages of Alzheimer's disease, which to this stage we know very little about. And we would like to understand how those protein levels change well before people develop the very abnormal levels of protein which occur in people with dementia. And if we do that, then we can start to have ways of really detecting Alzheimer's disease much earlier than when the symptoms actually begin.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Noah, for coming to provide us with all this information. If any of you are interested in participating in the Healthy Brain Project biomarker study, or you have any extra questions about this, please email us at healthybrainproject@florey.edu.au. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christine. I come from a little place called Sugarloaf Creek, which is out near Seymour, and I'm down here today to have a few tests, including a lumbar puncture to give some fluid or some spinal fluid to the Healthy Brain Project. I agreed to be a participant because my mum was diagnosed as having dementia, not necessarily Alzheimer's, and I suppose I look at it as I want to help find a cure for it for a couple of reasons. One, because potentially I'm going to get it. But number two, if you can help by doing nothing but answering a few questionnaires and giving up some time, it's what you do. You help, you give a little bit to get a little bit. But I'm doing it because it's an illness that we don't know enough about, and if we can find out enough and potentially help somebody to not get it, because it's not that hard on the person that's got dementia, but as a family member of the person that has, it's just soul destroying to go in and know that they don't know who you are or why you're there, and you lose the ability to talk to them about the people that we loved, but they don't know who they are by the name you've always called them. I'm not worried about the lumbar puncture at all. I've talked to you about it. I Googled it. That's what you do. I know that they're going to lay me on a bed and expose my back, local anaesthetic, and they're going to take a bit of the fluid, and I've asked you if you'll show it to me because I like to see that sort of stuff. I know what the very rare odd side effects are, and I know how to treat them. I'm not worried about it at all. Everybody's gone, oh, lumbar puncture, and I've said to them, don't worry about it. They've told me what can go wrong. I don't expect anything to go wrong. If a little bit of my fluid can make a difference, they can have it. You can have whatever fluids you want. Because, as I said, it's important to me to give to medical research, because if we don't, nobody finds out anything about anything. It was surprisingly easy. The worst part was the local anaesthetic. The actual procedure itself was very easy, very simple, not unpleasant, not pleasant either, but not unpleasant. Very, very simple, not difficult, don't feel peculiar. It was a funny sensation when the needle went in, but not unpleasant. Not difficult. I don't know what to say. It wasn't horrible, and I hadn't expected it to be, but it wasn't even bordering on what could have been horrible. Fine. Looking forward to going home.
Great.
Yeah, but look, do it. Thank you.